So, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Farmer. We're about to start our first Ignite Energy Africa online summit. So, I'm just going to introduce what Ignite Africa is all about. Ignite Energy Africa is a hub to help shape the future of energy in Africa and globally. And we do this by discussions. The aim is that the discussions would spark innovation in energy and will also help educate people in a simplified way about what energy is about. I'm Vome Aghoghovbia-Gafaar. I'm the founder of Ignite Energy Africa. I studied chemical engineering at UCL. I have an MSc in Global Management of Natural Resources. I started my energy experience at Bulb. So I worked as an energy specialist at Bulb, which is the UK's fastest growing energy company. And I also work as a management consultant I'd worked as a management consultant at different energy companies in the UK. So I'm passionate about energy, passionate about educating people about energy and also sparking innovation. So the Ignite Energy Online Summit is here for the next 4 weeks to interview different energy leaders and experts and find out why they went into energy and also how they feel the whole COVID-19 is going to impact the energy industry. Today, we have the fantastic Ifeoma Malo here with us today. She's our first guest. She's fantastic. She's the co-founder and CEO of Clean Technology Hub. She's the country director in Nigeria for Power for All, and she's also the past senior advisor to the Minister of Power in Nigeria. So good afternoon, Ifeoma. Very good to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Vome. Glad to be joining you.
Great. So how's your day been so far?
Typical, like the past 6 or 7 weeks now that we've been home. Just a lot of working from home, trying to adapt to our new realities, basically, and trying to still push our work around energy access and climate change. So.
Great. So yeah, I have a few questions, and a lot of people were excited when they saw you that you were coming to interview with us today. The first one I'll ask, can you just tell us more about yourself and what made you go into energy?
So it's a bit serendipitous. I always say this. I'm not an engineer by training. In fact, I had no engineering inclination or interests throughout my educational career. I'm a lawyer by training who has policy and business degrees as well. And I consider myself a policy wonk, a business strategist. And I got into the energy sector because I was doing things around policy and regulatory around the time that Nigeria was trying to privatize its power assets. And participating in all of that legal, regulatory, business strategy work, doing a lot of the financing, looking at a lot of the finance and financial regulations around sale of the biggest sale of any utility assets that has occurred globally, I got more and more interested in the power sector. And that's how I made the transition from doing pure policy, regulatory, legal work to doing more of energy access work, doing electricity and power and utility, large-scale utility work, and now focused on renewable energy and energy access. So that's been the pathway. So.
Okay, fantastic. And as a lawyer, how do you find working in the energy industry?
I think it's exciting. And I think, being a lawyer gives you a different dimension to several things. I work with a lot of engineers, and I always tease them because, I think engineering, there's something about engineering that makes engineers try to figure out the nuts and bolts of everything in a way that can actually, they're always in their head, they're always in their head trying to, And lawyers are a bit different. Lawyers can sometimes be scattered, where ideas people, where people who don't necessarily need structure to work or to get stuff done. And that sort of dynamism, that sort of flexibility, that sort of ambiguity, I think sometimes is good in a sector like this that is constantly evolving, and that, you know, the market is constantly evolving, and constantly changing. So that's where I've seen the legal training come in and help me to sort of adapt to all of the changes that are going on currently in the power sector.
That's so true. Engineers were always in our head, always trying to solve problems. And an engineer can attest to that. Yeah, we're always like thinking of how to solve the next problem, what to do. So that's very interesting. Into energy policies. What then made you start Clean Technology Hub? And you can tell us about what you do there and what motivated you to start.
I'll do that very, very quickly. So I used to work for the government, the Nigerian government. In fact, I used to be a senior aide to two different ministers. First, the Minister of Finance, then the Minister of Power. I also used to consult as a senior advisor to the chairman of the CEO of the regulator for the energy access sector, for the electricity sector, NERC. And in all of that work, one of the things, especially when I was in the power sector, that used to frustrate me was the lack of opportunities for young people to come into the sector, especially entrepreneurs. If you were not doing large-scale utility, in other words, if you didn't have billions, gazillions of dollars to buy a disco or build a generating company, right? There was very little space for young, smart, dynamic, innovative people to come into the sector. So that was number one. So there was a frustration for me when a lot of young people would come to me as one of the minister's trusted aides at the time and say, I have this proposal. It's about renewable energy. It's about energy access. I've developed a meter. I've developed a remote sensor. I've developed a remote monitoring system. I've, fabricated this technology that can help drive this, sector forward. And there was just nothing we could do for them. There was no entry point for them into this market because first, a lot of the components, power components that are used in the country are imported. And then secondly, people were very focused on grid-based electricity and utility. So nobody was looking at all of the smaller renewable energy access, the mini grids, the microgrids, the standalone. I mean, people were doing those, but those were also people who had enough capital, and whether it was enough social capital in terms of people they know that they could do that work for, or people who, had some godfathers. So there wasn't that level playing field. And so it was frustrating to me to see people who I felt had talent, just be turned away. And so it was that made me decide, okay, if I left government, I was going to do something to change this. And that's how Clean Tech Hub came about. I was an Eisenhower Fellow in 2015, and part of that fellowship forces you to sort of think about what you want to do. It's a mid-career program for professionals across the globe. I was part of the global program network. And I wanted to do my own fellowship around, renewable energy, understand what renewable energy was, but also understand the business of it. So while I was on the fellowship, which was about 3 months, I was traveling over the US, meeting renewable energy companies, meeting incubation companies, innovation companies, all of those sort of companies that are supporting startups, going to see solar farms, going to see, maker spaces, and just trying to cobble up together an idea of what I am going to do when we come back to Nigeria. And so that's how, when I came back, part of my project plan, because you leave that fellowship with a project plan, was to come back, incorporate a hub that was going to help support startups and entrepreneurs in renewable energy access. So that was it. That's how Clean Tech Hub came to be.
Okay, that's fantastic. So starting Clean Tech Hub, what would you say your challenges have been in terms of trying to drive growth in the renewable energy sector in Nigeria? So you had this fantastic idea to try and give people more opportunities, innovation to drive growth, but what has the landscape been like in Nigeria?
It's been rough and tumble. I mean, like one of the things because now we're incubating quite a number of companies. We're incubating about 20 companies at the moment. And in the past, we've incubated about eight one of the things I always say to people, because even we started off Clean Tech Hub, we were also a startup trying to incubate other startups, right, in the renewable energy space. So we were just a very new company trying to give support to companies around their business strategy, ideas, around fundraising, when we also didn't know our way around the market. So one of the things that has helped us is just that dynamism of us always going back, myself and the team going back to say, okay, what should we be doing? What should we be doing? One of the core questions we always ask is, what does the market need at this point, at this particular moment, and what would it need in the future? So there's the planning that we do for, the 6 months to 18 months, which is attending to market needs. People come to us and say, please do this market studies, this scoping studies, do this, whatever. But the core of our work is actually futuristic. It's, okay, 5 years from now, where do we think this market is going? And how can we support where it is going? Not when it is there, then we now start putting in the structures. How can we build that capacity to make sure that we're ready to support that market? So it is that to answer your question very briefly, it is the dynamism that we bring into thinking ahead and trying to see how the market is evolving, predicting what it's going to be, reading a lot of market reports, and understanding trends, so that we know how we build out the future of our work in this sector.
Great. So do you find that your experience as working as a senior advisor to the Minister of Power in Nigeria, do you find that has helped you in terms of how you have shaped Clean Tech Hub? Do you think Clean Tech Hub, sorry, do you think that it has helped you in your, how you think about it, how you're shaping the company?
In many ways. I mean, one of the biggest advantages of having worked with government is that, even though since we started Clean Tech Hub, we've barely done anything with government. In other words, we've never gone to any government agency to ask for contracts, to ask for work. About 80% of our work currently comes from the private sector. 80% of that, 75% of it is from international clients. And slowly we're building credibility with our local clients. And then the remaining 20% are for international NGOs, other international NGOs that are looking for us to do work or be their local partners in the country or in the sub-region. But to answer your question, one of the advantages we've had, because you can't divorce business from government, is a lot of the work we do, especially the research part of our work, involves reaching out to government and getting data or information from government. So we find ourselves in that way having to go into government offices to say, well, can you help us with this? Do you have an opinion on this? Where is the government's policy direction on this? And it's that human capital, because one of the things you have to do is have that access and that social capital, that relational capital. Yes, so working in government has helped in that way. Also it has also helped us understand government bureaucracy and how to navigate it. And also in many ways understand how government policy formulation or regulatory formulation comes into play. So we're able to advise clients, better. So that's how it's helped us.
Okay, that's great. That's fantastic. So about government policy now in terms of COVID-19. That's what everyone's talking about right now. And it has disrupted almost every industry. Every industry is trying to think about future strategies, how this is going to, change plans for different companies. Also, some people are saying that this is going to be the final kick in, transitioning the energy industry from fossil fuels to renewables. So I just want to know, what are your thoughts in terms of how you think this pandemic is going to affect the energy industry, particularly in Africa?
Ooh, you can either look at it or you can look at it as an opportunity. One of the things that we're finding, especially with some of the interventions that have come out from government and the private sector for the energy access sector much broadly, is how critical electricity is to human existence. So take, for instance, I can speak for small and medium-sized companies. What you're doing, if your job in the energy sector is maybe selling solar lamps, or is selling something, maybe meters or whatever, because of the limitations around travel, the limitations around their social distancing, right? You're obviously not going to be making the same amount of sales. So if your core business strategy is sales in this sector, it's going to be impacted. But if your core business is in services, which is what a critical mass of the electricity sector is, then you would see that this is an opportunity to accelerate your offering. Take, for example, one of the places where we're finding that there's a huge need is a lot of these isolation centers are needing 24 hours electricity. Well, guess who? Sure. They can't get it from the grid, right? I mean, you can't be on a ventilator and then the NEPA takes light or the disco takes light. That's instant. Sure. It's not just that COVID has killed you, NEPA has also, or whatever. Do you understand? So what we've seen is private sector, people like Olon, who's an impact investor, people like the Rural Electrification Agency and the Ministry of Power coming in and saying, okay, we want to get electricity to all to these isolation centers so that electricity doesn't go off at any time. They are not solely dependent on the grid. And, beyond that now, we're seeing people actually saying, okay, beyond the isolation centers, how do we even expand this to testing centers? How then do we expand this to primary healthcare centers? So that's one way we're seeing an opportunity, even around COVID-19. The other opportunity I see is around support for the cultural value chain. Food is something that people are never going to stop eating, even as you're locked up at home. I feel like we've been eating more, right? And I was reading something in the newspapers, I think yesterday or today, where a lot of alarm is being sounded in Western countries, specifically Europe and America, about the disruption to food production because of COVID. But you see that if people had issue, because you'd have better, you would have more storage, you'd have enough electricity to build storage, you'd have enough electricity to do processing, food processing, you'd have enough electricity to help with preservation, especially for produce, whether it's meat or whether, all of those things that have sort of been automated in several other countries. And we don't have many of those things here. But even for the field, think about if you're a tomato farmer and you're farming a lot of tomatoes, but because you can't move it from Jos to Abuja or to Lagos, if you had a cooling storage system, right, it wouldn't be such a problem because you'll just wait out. Do you understand? Yes. Exactly. But if you don't, then those things perish. You've lost. And remember that these things are farmed seasonally. They are not, you can't farm tomatoes or pepper or onions 12 months in a year. These are seasonal crops. But these are the things people eat almost all the time. So those are the things, I think that if we can get our energy access sector married into the agricultural value chain in a more integrated way, that you see that they're addressing some of the challenges around COVID.
Yes, that's very interesting. Like in terms of thinking of the isolation camps and thinking of even within this COVID-19, there are opportunities because those isolation camps need 24/7 electricity. Agriculture needs electricity as well. So there are opportunities even with the challenges. But how do you feel in terms of a young person wanting to start an energy company and wanting to address some of these challenges in terms of seeking funding in the Nigerian environment, especially post-COVID-19? How do you feel that's going to be as well? Because I know you also run an incubator as part of your company.
So the government is running a lot of palliatives that they're trying to use to support small and medium-sized enterprises. The CBN is, and I think if I can't recall which other agency, I think, one of the other agencies, I can't remember if it's Medan, I can't recall now. But there are lots of these forms that are flying around and asking people to fill out forms, to talk about how COVID-19 is impacting their business. One of the things I'll tell young people is, please fill out as many forms as come your way, because you just never know. And I'll give an example. I remember I was in Ministry of Finance when we started the UWIN. There was something called the UWIN, UWIN contest. And that contest was to look for, it was like an incubation program, but by the government under the Ministry of Finance and under the Ministry of Youth and Sports at the time. And it was to find young Nigerians under the age of, I can't remember if it was 35 or 40, who had businesses or who wanted to start businesses, and will write a business plan and proposal, or a pitch proposal, and send it in. It will be evaluated by a number who, if they find your idea and you go through a process, you might be one of those selected to win 10 million. I knew a lot of people who got that 10 million who didn't know anybody in government. But you know what? There were lots of people who were skeptical because they thought, this is government, so why do I bother, right? And didn't fill out those forms, didn't bother to participate. Well, they lost out. UWIN lasted for 4 years or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And in those 5 years, I think they had over maybe 100 or 100, and I can't remember, 300 or 400 people who were given that 5 million or 10 million, depending on which category you fall into. But I knew many people who I would say, go and apply, and they would say, well, it's government. They already know themselves. But, the truth is, if as many times as you see these forms asking you to fill out information, what you need funding for, how this is going to impact your business, please fill out those forms. The other thing I think is important for young people to be doing right now is to be looking at the value chains, manufacturing. I've talked about agriculture, I've talked about health, and then the other one is manufacturing. I've seen a lot of young people that have gone into production of masks. We're not going to stop using masks, face masks, or some of these PPEs anytime soon. So if you know that you have the ability to produce masks, for health workers, or even you produce the hazmat suit, there's a way, you have some ways to fabricate that and produce those things, or even the goggles, or even the N95 masks, all of those PPEs, protective wears that health workers need. Please go ahead and start from somewhere. All you need is a prototype. All you need is just, a demo. And then work from there into, because this is not what we know about this disease. I mean, what we don't know about this disease is more than what we know. And we know that this isn't going to end anytime soon, right?
Yes,
we're just so please start from somewhere, because you can actually begin to fill in all of the voids that we see. We have young Nigerians and young Africans already being innovative and producing local test kits. I saw the video that has gone viral in Senegal, right? And they're just adapting existing models to answer to the current need of today for COVID. So if you're that inclined and you know how to fabricate these things, why don't you try? It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So the things I'm hearing is that, yes, there are challenges, but there are definitely many opportunities if we actually look at everything that's going on. And then in terms of funding, just apply. There are government initiatives, apply and try your best. And also start from where you are. Start small and it will grow over time. Okay. I'm going towards the end of my 2 last questions. So if anyone has questions they would like to ask Ifeoma Malo, please can you put them in the comment section, so we'll ask her at the end. So my 2 last questions. The first one, in terms of Power for All, what do you do with that? What's the initiative for Nigeria?
That's a great question. So Power for All is a global decentralized renewable energy organization. It's an advocacy organization focused on advancing the goals around decentralized renewable energy, because we believe at Power for All that is the cheapest, quickest, and most cost-effective way of getting electricity to the millions of people that are not electrified across the globe, not just in Nigeria. And specifically in Nigeria, one of the things you find is, decentralized renewable energy is focused on off-grid. It's how do we use renewable energy resources? And it's not just solar. There are a whole number of them. There's biomass, there's mini hydro, there's wind, there's biogas, there's geothermal. How do we get those decentralized renewable energy sources down into the hands of those who need it, and in a productive way that can help them save money, earn income, and be economically sustainable? Right, so that's the whole philosophy around what Power for All does. So they work across government, trying to get government's policy to make it easier to solve demand-based issues and supply-based issues. So issues around people not being able to clear their goods. When they bring solar products, they are not able to clear them for months or years. They work with government on all of those things. They work with government in making sure that procurement for solar bids are done in a transparent manner so that people feel more confident in the sector and that the jobs go to the appropriate or the most qualified developer, so that it's not just somebody who doesn't know what he's doing but has a godfather agency that gets the job and does a shoddy job, and then the mini grid or the micro grid or whatever doesn't work after 3 months. So Power for All helps with all of that work on the policy end. And then they also do a lot of work. We at Power for All, we started up, we incubated the Renewable Energy Association of Nigeria. We did the same in Senegal, and we did the same in Tanzania, and in a few other countries. And that's to give the industry a voice, a collective voice, and a bargaining chip, so that when they go and sit with governments, they're going with one collective voice. And it's not just different private business people going to go and meet them to say, we want this, my goods are stuck at the ports. This is the problem I'm having with this community. Is there a way that you people can intervene? So when during this COVID-19, they organized themselves and they got waivers from the government to be categorized as essential workers. So members of the Renewable Energy Organization in Nigeria were able to organize, go to the government, especially in Lagos State specifically, and say, listen, we need to be able to move around because we're providing light to manufacturers, we're providing light to hospitals, we're providing light to whatever. Can you give us exemptions so that we can move around? And they wouldn't have been able to do that if they were not an organized industry association. And so I'm very happy that that's one of the things that Power for All was one of our legacies that we're able to put in place. And then, of course, we work with, the private companies and with different civil society organizations, trying to help them articulate their needs around energy access, whether it's from the healthcare angle, education angle, gender angle, or youth angle.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking us through that. That's like fantastic work that you're doing in terms of running that and also running Energy Tech Hub at the same time. That's really fantastic. And another thing, when I was reading through your profile, so this is my last question. So if anyone has questions to ask, so we can do that at the end. This is my last question. So I was reading through your profile and also went on your company's page, and I saw that you do a gender-based program, and I found that very interesting. So a gender-based program trying to get energy access to women around Nigeria, but also trying to encourage more women to go into the energy sector so you can become leaders and entrepreneurs. So what made you, what made you go into that, and what has your experience been trying to run this program and also encourage more women?
Wow. So it's been like when we first started this, when I first started working in the energy sector, it was a bit like an old boys club. You had a lot of, and I'm sure you can relate with that being an engineering student, right? You have a lot of engineers, and it was a very close-knit group. And so it was, I would sit in meetings where I'll be the only woman and be wondering, my God, and I'm not even an engineer, so again, there was that dynamic. There's a dynamic of you being a woman, and then there's a dynamic of you not being a technical person.
Yes.
And so for me, it was very uncomfortable. And one of the things I said to myself was, my life mission is to bring as much women, to demystify this idea that to do electricity, energy access, utility, or power work, or have a career or be a professional in this sector, that you cannot be a woman, you cannot be a successful woman in the sector. And I found some like-minded. I mean, there were a few women there. There were people like Habiba Ali of Society Renewable, Hannah Kabir of Creeds, or even Bahija to Abubakar, who works for the Ministry of Environment and is one of the mothers of the sector. But not a lot. But that has changed. In 5 years, 6 years, that has changed. We've seen more women. And I won't take sole credit for it, but I think also putting ourselves out there and being the guinea pigs, where we were sort of working with women across 4 levels. One of them was looking at women that own small and medium-sized enterprises and trying to teach them how to use solar to grow their business. So I can give you a specific example of a woman, a baker, who had a bakery, who was spending so much when she showed us how much she was spending on diesel to run her bakery. And we got her the right size with a developer who was able to give her the right size of solar system. And it was a hybrid system, actually, solar and gas, to run her business. It reduced her overhead, her operating costs by almost 40%. And she was able to increase her yields. The other thing that has happened is that we also look at women in rural areas. How do we teach the ones that are, in homes, how to start businesses, so that beyond just using the lights that they get, the solar lamps they get for lighting, how can they use it to start a business, whether it's phone charging business or making ice block, with the solar coolers, those sort of things. And we've been very happy when we've seen those things succeed and women become more economically empowered and contributing to the home in that way. And most importantly, it's also interesting to see a lot of young women come to me and admire you. We want to be like you. And that's why we now want to work in the renewable energy sector. And I know it's not just me. A lot of women, that are now leaders in the sector get that. And so representation matters. The fact that they are seeing women being successful in this field and in this industry means that they feel like they also have a chance to succeed. So there's also that mentorship aspect that occurred over time.
Yes, that's true. So yeah, that's my experience. So being an engineer, I can attest to that there are few women. I grew up in a family of all girls, and then I went to an only girls secondary school. So I was just used to being around only girls. And I went to university engineering, and I was one of the few girls in class, and I found that very strange, to be honest. So I'm quite passionate as well about encouraging more women to go into science and technology and engineering and being in the energy space. So that was something that definitely touched me, and I was quite inspired by that and all the work you are doing. So many people have written so many questions. I'll ask a few of them. The first one is the government establishing a feed-in tariff scheme to encourage investors? Someone asked that.
Yes.
If you know
that's the that. Short answer. That's the short answer.
So they are doing that. Yes.
They will get there eventually. They will get there eventually. So there's all the policy framework in place already to make a feed-in tariff possible. But the infrastructure to make that actually happen hasn't been put in place. But we will get there eventually. So that's the short answer. Yeah.
To be honest, in the UK, the feed-in tariff scheme is still something they're still trying to implement as well. So it's something. The next question is there a need to expand the government COVID-19 social intervention efforts to cover off-grid solar, and how best should this be done?
I think, it's critical, because when you think about the vulnerable population and the population that is going to be most impacted, by COVID-19. So these are communities that don't have functional primary health care centers. And you have some of the poorest of the poor, the strength of a nation isn't judged or isn't determined by how well they treat their rich and their strong. It's how well you also take care of your vulnerable, right? And think about the off-grid communities that are being served by the solar or the renewable energy industry. I think they're also a critical part, because one of the things you will begin to see is also the social element, which is a decongestion of urban areas, right? Look at what's happening in Kano. Everybody says, oh, there's going to be the massive pandemic in Kano. Well, the reason why that is because, Lagos and Kano are really, do you understand? The reason why people think they're epicenters is because of how congested they are. People travel into Kano from all over the world, even from outside the country, from Niger Republic, from, like they travel. Same thing with Lagos. They're coming from Togo, they're coming from Benin, they're coming from all the other states of the Federation. But one of the things you will see, if rural areas are actually given attention, they have electricity, and they have electricity to start small and medium-sized scale production or manufacturing or economic activity. People will stay where they live and try to make an income. The reason why they are moving to Kano and Lagos is because that's where they feel like they can make, they can hit it and become successful. So it is important that government looks beyond urban cities and looks also at rural communities where off-grid solar industries or companies are serving, and look at how they can help them grow and begin to help grow those communities through having those electricity infrastructure put in place, and help them become, economically viable at the same time. If people have electricity, they'll be able to start a business. So yes, in a nutshell.
Yeah. Power, healthcare, and education are the bedrock of society. So I definitely agree with that. The next question is, with different innovations being developed this period, including the energy sector, how can all stakeholders support the work your company, so Clean Technology Hub, is doing in driving and scaling up innovations?
That's a good question. So we have a volunteers network we launched in January. And I'll encourage everybody, if you're interested, go to our website and send us an email at info@cleantechnologyhub.org. We have about 180 people signed up as our volunteers network. And these out of that 180, 150 are residents here in Nigeria. The reason why we started it is simple. Clean Tech Hub is a small organization. People think there are many. We are 20 people. We have a staff of 20. And many times people are asking us to do things we cannot do. Recently we were invited to Adamawa, and at the time we were invited to Adamawa, I had 7 people doing some work for us in Uyo. I had another 8 people in Aba doing some other projects. So if 7 and 8, 15 are out of the office, there was nobody to go to, do you understand, to go to Adamawa. And so one of the things we said to ourselves is we can't continue to stretch ourselves so thin, right? And we don't want to continue to say no to all of these opportunities that come our way. Yeah. So starting the Volunteers Network was a way to say, okay, let us even identify within our network people who are interested in this sector, so that if there's work for us to do in Adamawa or Niger or Bauchi or wherever, and we have people there, we can actually train them, right? We can invite them to Abuja, pay for them to come, train them on what we need them to do, or even do a virtual training and have them go do the work for us, right? We also want to begin to do online educational trainings where we can actually teach people about this sector, teach people about the industry, connect them more to the ecosystem. And so these are the things that we're doing to sort of help drive the sector. And we invite anybody who wants to join. It's free to join our volunteers network. You just have to be active in it and active in our events and activities for us to actually make some of these opportunities I'm talking about open to you. So recently there was another opportunity in Enugu for over this COVID-19, where one of our partners was looking, because they couldn't travel, they were looking for people who were engineering students or technical students in Enugu who could help them go and become enumerators. And we just reached out to our networks and said, please, who are the engineering students in Enugu, right? And we got, I think, about 10 people, 10 whatever. And that wasn't, we selected about 7. So that's the advantage of that volunteers network. And those, we passed it on to the developer to say, here's the 7. And they're getting jobs now, even in this lockdown. They are doing work and getting paid. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay. So volunteering, helping out. Okay, that's fantastic. The next one is a very interesting question. So what are your views on nuclear energy in Nigeria? Do you think that's a viable option?
Wow. So yes, it is. I think it is. I think nuclear is something that Nigeria has looked at. In fact, there are not a lot of African countries that have, first of all, nuclear capabilities or are exploring the potential or the opportunities for nuclear for power to be generated through nuclear systems. And sometimes there are reasons why, because people are worried. When people hear nuclear, they get a bit reactive about what the the implications are, whether they have environmental or climate implications at the same time. But like South Africa is one of the countries that has been having conversations around nuclear energy. We've seen some countries in Europe that have been sort of harnessing that. What we need to do is really sit down and do a study and look at what the potential is, right? Versus what the risks are, and weigh them as a country. We can actually actively have that conversation and make the best decision for us as Nigerians. So I'm not one of those who would write off nuclear. I think there's potential for it. I think it can also be considered under certain circumstances. I think it can help us meet some of our energy targets. But under what framework should that occur is the research, the data, and all of the information that we have to sift through to make an informed decision.
Yeah, I agree. To be honest, even in developed countries, nuclear energy is a tricky one. We have people protesting, they don't want nuclear power plants. You have all the safety issues involved. So yes, you have to do a study to see how viable it is. And the last question we have is, what is the smart home and building scene like in Nigeria? Are there sufficient opportunities?
Oh, that's a great question. That's becoming, we've seen an increasing interest around, smart cities, and under smart cities, the subsectors are smart building, smarter homes, smarter eco-friendly homes, and then the issues around mobility. How do you, use electric cars rather than diesel-fired cars, because these are considered cleaner sources of refined or powering your automobile. So I think, because there are a number of subsectors that are dependent on the way our housing sector is currently structured, there is a lot of opposition in terms of thinking beyond, what we see now. So you can think of the cement manufacturers. If you're going to build smarter homes, it's going to involve less cement. It's going to involve less concrete. If you're thinking about smarter homes, it's going to involve, there are so many other subsectors that are going to be impacted. You're going to have to wire your house so that you're using renewable energy sources for heating and for cooling. Right? And that's it goes into building codes, changing some of the building codes that we already have. It is a conversation that we must get to if we're going to build a sustainable future here in Nigeria. And it's not just a Ministry of Energy or Power issue, because now you're talking of an intergovernmental agency conversation with housing, with transport, and with manufacturing. Right, to make sure that you're bringing in all of the relevant stakeholders that might be impacted by whatever changes will be made. So I think there's an opportunity for it. I think it's the way to go. I think we have a huge housing crisis. I think the cost of housing in Nigeria is so high that we need to actually bring them down and crash them by building much more sustainable homes and eco-friendly homes. And that means also using, much more renewable energies to power our homes and the things that we use in them. So.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ifeoma, for answering these questions. I'm going through the interview. I'm just going to summarize key points of what was spoken about today for people to see opportunities. So Ifeoma Malo is the CEO and co-founder of Clean Technology Hub. Please follow them on Instagram, Clean Technology Hub. She's also the country director in Nigeria for Power for All, and she's the past senior advisor to the Minister of Power in Nigeria. She shared her views that yes, with COVID-19, there are challenges in the energy sector, but there are also many opportunities. Energy 24/7 energy for isolation camps, testing centers, so there are opportunities there. In agriculture, you need opportunities as well about cooling systems for food that's being produced. So there's so many opportunities in terms of funding government bodies that you should apply for them. Whether you feel you're going to get them or not, just put yourself out there and apply. that there are lots of opportunities still in the energy sector. We're spoken about so many great initiatives, feed-in tariff, nuclear, off-grid. So there's so much potential. So thank you so much, Ifeoma, for joining us. It was so insightful. I really enjoyed speaking to you today.
Thank you, Vome. And I will enjoin anybody who's interested in this sector to please reach out to us in Nigeria. Currently now, we've been able to build up our capacity where we're working in 11 other African countries and working with industry associations through GOGLA. GOGLA is the Global Lightning Off-Grid Association. So it's based in Netherlands, and we're doing work with them in 11 other countries. So building capacity in that line. So even if you're a Nigerian entrepreneur and you're thinking of doing work in another African country, I will encourage you to please reach out, because we want our own people also to get themselves out there, right? I always come, when it comes to the building sector, let me just say this, Vome. When it comes to the building sector in Nigeria, the people who are running it in Nigeria is the Benin Republic and Togo,
Wow.
They are the ones, yes, they've taken over construction. They are the ones who are the masons. They are the ones who are the whatever. They're doing all of that. But now that we know that we've built expertise in energy access in Nigeria, we have a lot of young, hungry people, innovative people who are building expertise and who are interested in this sector. Can I encourage you to even look beyond Nigeria? If you want to go and do a mini grid or a microgrid in Benin Republic and Togo, please come and talk to us. We'll be happy to support you and introduce you to the right people. So the same way people export their workers from neighboring countries in here, right? We should be able to also export our own talent and workers. And we're also looking for support. If you think of ways that you want to partner and support us in the work that we do, please feel free to reach out to us, visit our website, and Vome has given some hints about our social media handles. But I just wanted to say that, so think big. Think beyond your current, Nigeria is big, but, Nigeria is not the whole world. There's a whole world out there where you can actually, grow and make your own impact if you actually are serious about it.
Yeah. And I just saw a question about how easy is it to join energy industry if you're not an engineer. So engineers, there are a lot of engineers in the industry, but it's not just for engineers. We have lawyers, we have accountants, we have people that study all sorts of degrees working in energy. And it's like any other industry, you learn about it and you do the work there. So don't be discouraged if you didn't study engineering. There are a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs, for any kind of background you have, really. It's about reading about it, putting yourself out there and seeing what's available. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Ifeoma.
I think you're absolutely right. And people forget that, like we did a training, and this is where I'm going to end because I know we're almost out of time. So I want to be respectful of your time as well, Vome, except if there's another critical question that comes in. We did a training once, I think, across some states for university students. And it wasn't for engineering students in those universities. It was for students that are not STEM and are not engineering. Because think about it, listen, the people who are driving, there's the engineers who build the products we're using or who install them. But then you need marketers, you need business strategists, you need human resources, you need accountants, you need finance people. Do you understand? You need logistics and operations people. You need lawyers who are going to look at contracts and agreements and help you unpack them so that you're not signing the wrong thing or signing away the life of your company. So you need a lot of technical and non-technical staff and people who have read social sciences or arts, right? I mean, some of our biggest designers, people who are true designers, great designers, are people who read arts, who are fine artists. And they are the ones who actually come and do a lot of the design stuff that we have in Clean Tech Hub. So there is space for, if you can think of how many people study courses that are not engineering related and work for ExxonMobil, work for Chevron, work for Total-Fina Elf, who work for the oil companies. The same kind of people also in the renewable energy sector and the climate change, because it's still a business. It's still, you're still going to need the same sort of support services to be able to make your business profitable. So I think that's an important point to make.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ifeoma, for today. Thank you for everyone that has joined. We're going to put this video on YouTube, and we're also going to turn it into an article which you can share with people. Thank you so much for joining, and hope everyone has a nice evening. Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you, Vome. It was great doing this. Bye.